So what we have on the bench here today is a Macintosh SE, which was a model that ran from about 1987 to I think the early 90s. This is the version with a 1.4 megabyte disk, which means it came out pretty late in that cycle. In fact, when those first came out, they were labeled as the Mac SE FDHD, but this one is labeled as the Mac SE Superdrive, which was an even later marketing innovation. And the chip codes all date this to mid 1990, so that's pretty much where it came from. Now this has been running happily for a couple of months, but all of a sudden, last time I turned it on, it started making a very nasty crackling sound and gave me a distinct smell of fish, which was not very pleasant. So it was time to do something about it. My first theory was that there would be a bad capacitor on that analog board. So I spent some time yesterday checking it over, checking all these spots very carefully, looking for any signs of leaking or burning, any bad or dry solder joints. And so I went through this all pretty carefully, but I really didn't find any problems on there. So I don't think it's a bad capacitor. I sort of gave up on that theory, at least for the moment. I haven't yet taken apart the power supply. Now the power supply unit, those were all third-party units in these. There's two ones that mainly get used, a Sony power supply and an Aztec power supply. This board has the Aztec power supply, which people don't like as much as the Sony. And I will take it apart and check it out, but that's no longer my operative theory. So let's take a look over here on the logic board. So the first thing one always has to be concerned with on these boards is whether the battery has exploded, which can happen pretty often. But this battery seems to be in great shape. It hasn't leaked and it certainly hasn't exploded and caused all sorts of damage the way they can. But my bigger concern is these components down here. So I'll put in a close-up if it doesn't show on video, but there's a bunch of corrosion. You can see just general sort of crud down here, mainly around a bunch of through-hole components. Over here, but especially over here, this really seems to be the source of it. And in fact, there's a little spreading to these chips, especially this one here and that one there. And there's a little sort of damage over here. So at first I was wondering if perhaps something had dripped some crap on it because there's nothing on the back of the board. So I wondered if something had dripped down. And so this part would be right under the hard drive, the drive cage. But there's no sign of anything bad on the drive. There's no sign of corrosion on the drive cage itself. So I sort of given up on that. But what we do have, and again, I'll put some stills in here. We do have some signs of damage on this is the ER shield that sort of sits at the bottom of the machine. And you can see there's a sign here that something bad has happened once upon a time. It looks like this was a source. And similarly, on the inside of the case, there are some signs of damage on there. And so if you just look at how this lines up with the board, because it would sort of sit a little bit like, I guess, like that. You can see that this sort of is clearly sort of in the same sort of broad general area. So my concern now is I think that there was some water damage and that's what's caused this corrosion. So we just really need to clean up this corrosion, replace these components. Unfortunately, I have the specs for all these components thanks to the amazing SE Reloaded, Mac SE Reloaded project, which built and designed a whole new board for this. So shout out to Kai Robinson for his amazing work on that because he specified every single component on there. If these chips are bad, this one's a 6522 and that's very easy to replace. This one, on the other hand, this is the real-time clock, and this was a custom Apple chip, and so that's going to be basically impossible to replace unless I find a donor parts machine, and I don't currently have one. So this is the first thing I want to do is clean up this corrosion, desolder these components and replace them with new ones. I'm going to sort of, I don't think I'm going to desolder these chips because I don't think there's actually any problems on the chips. This one is not so great. There are some tracks here that look like they might be in danger. And again, the Mac SE Reloaded project is great because it lets me trace these very easily. And I think all the traces that are in danger just run to the PDS slot, which I'm not using. So that's my next step is to do these. I'm not inclined to, looking at the analog board here, I'm not inclined to just start recapping that just now because I don't like to recap until I understand what's going on. On the other hand, these are all 30-year-old capacitors, so at some point they're going to go. So that's what I'm planning to do. Very optimistically, I labeled this video as part 1. I've never done this before, so I've got no idea if there's actually going to be a part 2. My expertise is minimal. It all comes from watching lots of videos by Adrian Black and watching lots of Noel's Retro Lab and those kinds of things. So we'll see if that's taught me anything at all. But obviously it's my fault if they haven't. So that's my next step, is to work on sort of cleaning up this part of the board, and then we'll see if we get anywhere.